Recorded live at the 2022 NACDA Convention in Las Vegas, this is From the Chair. Here is your host, Mike Hamilton.
Welcome to today's episode of From the Chair. I'm your host, Mike Hamilton, and we're here in Las Vegas this week recording From the Chair with athletic directors from around the country at NACDA 2022. It's given us a chance to sit live with some folks, and certainly today it's a great pleasure to sit with my friend Greg Byrne, the Director of Athletics at the University of Alabama. Welcome in.
Thanks, Mike. Good to sit here with you, and I've listened to some of the podcasts, and I guess you ran out of options, so you asked me to be a guest, so I'm honored.
You're way down the roster. We finally said, you know what, let's just drag him in.
We ran out of options.
Drag him in, yeah. Look, we have known each other for a long time. When we were both young guys, right, young pups. We've talked offline. I think I have great respect for your dad, obviously great respect for you personally, and you're one of a handful of folks who have actually grown up in the industry, right? And had family members who were senior level administrators who have had success. Obviously your dad had success as an athletic director at three major institutions, Oregon and Nebraska and A&M, along with his other work. And you were able to watch it firsthand from your household.
Right.
And I'm imagining that had a lot to do with you forming the opinion early on in life that maybe might be something you would be interested in. But as you know, sometimes you think you want to do that when you're a young guy, and then maybe someday you pivot to a different direction. I'd like to you to share a little bit about your story of how you became, interested, other than the obvious of, hey, this is what I might want to consider as a career.
Right. Well, it was a little bit osmosis, right? I figured when I was 5 years old, kids just grew up going to ball games and practices, and I had an interest early on. Yeah. I loved to compete. I had the genes for that. I was a decent athlete. I played everything at one point or another, and I was good enough to make all the teams and everything like that. But I wasn't good enough to get recruited by Alabama. Yeah. And so I learned that there were other skill sets that could have you involved in college sports from watching or sports in general from watching my dad. And he came up through fundraising. I remember annually when back in the 70s and early 80s, they'd have a fund drive. And I would think, fund drive? It's not fun to drive. I hate sitting in the car. And that's how I learned about what fundraising was. And so I decided that was a path I wanted to go. I like people, enjoy meeting a diverse, wide variety of folks. And so I've had some success at it. And thought that was a good, I learned early on, if you can generate revenue, you're always going to have opportunities, right? Which is good for everybody to think about out there. And so watching my dad, watching even the evolution of college athletics back then, when he went to Oregon, he was hired as the associate AD. You didn't have executive or deputies or senior associates or anything. He was the associate AD under Rick Bay. Rick Bay went to Ohio State from Oregon in 1983 or 84. My dad was 38 years old, became the AD at Oregon. The finalist for the job was him, like a 28-year-old assistant AD at Maryland, and a guy that owned the local sporting goods store in town.
Wow.
That's who the guy. It was in the article when he got hired that they hung up on his wall. And people talk about see where Oregon is now and how it's evolved dramatically. And Phil Knight back then was building his little sneaker company. Just got Nike it was fledgling, trying to get off the ground. And so I saw early on, this is a great environment to be in. You get to be around people from all different backgrounds. And now I'm talking about your student athletes, your coaches, and your staff. You check political differences at the door. You check religious differences at the door. You check things that divide us right now, more so than ever, which is sad.
Right.
And it brought people together. And so I loved that environment. I thought that was really special. And then you got a chance to play sports and be involved in competition and watch people develop who they were. And I had a real passion for it. And as you know, for a little while, hopefully I'm not jumping ahead on the questions, but for a little while I got out of it.
Right. I'm going to go there in a little bit.
Okay, so I'll leave that alone. But college athletics is such a special enterprise. It's not a perfect enterprise, especially right now, but it's such a good one that, I'm still passionate at 50 years old to this day and love being around the young people on the college campuses and what special things can happen by being a part of it.
Where was your first fundraising opportunity? Was it Arizona State?
No, I graduated from Arizona State. I followed Regina, my wife, now 28 years. Followed her to Phoenix from Oregon, finished my degree there. Interned for the Fiesta Bowl, sweeping the basement, unloading trucks, whatever I could do. And Jim Bartko, who we just had a celebration of life a little while ago in Eugene, he hired me to be the regional fundraiser for the Ducks in Medford, Oregon. Okay. And so I had all the way from Los Angeles up to Roseburg, Oregon. That was my territory. So I drove a ton. I had a courtesy car. I'm guessing I put 30,000 miles a year on. It was a lot of windshield time, but it was a great job. They had you down there by yourself, and I learned how to really work on my own. You had to have the self-discipline to make sure you got to the office every morning, and you went out and made your calls. Nobody was, email was just getting. I may have had my first email address there in Medford, and the cell phone I had was about the size of this chair right here, and you just learn how to operate. And I still say to this day that job in Oregon, down in Southern Oregon, is one of the great jobs in college sports because you can learn and grow so much. Yeah. And the biggest donors in that area look to you as their source of information.
You are the Ducks to them,
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. You were their AD in a lot of ways.
Yeah. So that's a tangent question then. I'm ADD, so I'll go off on a tangent every now and then. But there might be some folks from NAD watching this. Regional fundraising. Not everybody does that. Oregon did it for, I don't know if they still do it for a long time.
Well, my dad started it.
Okay. Yeah. So tell me your perspective on that.
So it was great. So basically what my dad's idea was, and I'm sure he saw it from somebody else, but he had Oregon, or University of Oregon's in Eugene, 100,000 people. Portland's 2 hours away, 1 million plus people at the time. Southern Oregon is 3 hours away. And he thought having a person there that would be out there pounding the pavement on a daily basis would prove to be successful. And that was back still too when, so much of what you and I got started on was annual fundraising. Right. And getting people to give $100 or $500 or $1,000, and when you got a $1,000 gift, that was a big deal. But having that be just large quantities of those types of gifts, and the reality is if you have the right fundraiser that's out there getting in front of people and waving the flag and getting people fired up, people are going to feel more of a connection. And it proved to be very, very fruitful. I don't know if the Ducks still have somebody in Southern Oregon. I know for a while they pulled somebody out of there, but I believe they still have people in Portland. And we have not done that at Alabama. We're pretty centrally located in the state that we can get to a lot of places pretty quickly. But we have our donors, our fundraisers in Tuscaloosa assigned to different territories. Okay. Houston, Dallas, Birmingham, the coast, Atlanta, Chicago, and they go out and make trips to those areas to go shake the trees and see what comes out.
So there was a guy at Oregon during those years that has been instrumental in my life and your life, who we both think very highly of, love, and that's Mitch Barnhart.
Yep.
And I think he actually served as a GA with your dad at San Diego State.
He interned for my dad at San Diego State.
Right.
I think started in 79 or 80.
Yeah, and then he went to Portland to represent the Ducks in Portland, right?
Yeah, he was. I think he may have been the first person in Portland for the Ducks, because when my dad left San Diego State to go to Oregon, and I think he hired Mitch and he and his wife Connie had just gotten married, and they were up in Portland together, and then he went to SMU.
Very rarely am I with you in a group of people when you don't share a little funny story about our time and our relationship, starting with the relationship with Mitch, but also my great skills, my great hiring skills.
Oh, you still made a really good hire. Yeah, you did. You know that.
You want to share that?
Well, I wasn't gonna bring it up.
Okay.
So I was the regional fundraiser for the Ducks in Portland. Oregon, Jim Bartko had moved me from Medford up to Portland, and Regina and I up there, and I had within a 2-week period, I had never been contacted about a job. I heard from Mitch, who you worked for,
right,
and I heard from Bruce Vandevelde, who worked for Joe Castiglione at Missouri. And both Missouri and Tennessee were looking for a director of annual giving, and I was so excited. I was 24, 25 years old, and so I go out to Missouri and Tennessee within a few days of each other, and if I may have the story wrong, but if I remember right, I think Missouri offered me the job, and Tennessee and a guy named Mike Hamilton did not. I always remember I was at Pumpkin Ridge. And back then you were on. We were at a golf tournament.
Yeah, I remember Pumpkin Ridge.
And you had to talk on payphones, but I got to check my voicemail back at the office. You had called me. I called you back from the payphone at Pumpkin Ridge, and you said, "Oh, Greg, you did a really good job, and you were trying not to just completely crush me." And you said, "I've hired somebody else." Well, the other guy he hired is a guy named John Curry. And that was a really good hire on Mike's part. So I finished second to John, and even though I do love to give him grief to this day, it was a really good hire on his part.
Well, the guy that didn't hire the guy that eventually became the athletic director at the University of Alabama.
I got turned down for other jobs too, so it's okay.
Well, look, I give Joe Castiglione grief because he had a chance to hire me at one point, and he didn't hire me.
Yep.
And so,
Yep.
right, at the end of the day, it all kind of circles around, and good people find good places. And,
That's right.
And it's all part of our life story, and certainly that's a part, I think a very big part of our friendship.
Absolutely.
Time, so.
Well, can I tell the next story?
Go for it.
So John,
if it's true.
Yeah, that's true. John leaves Tennessee and goes to Wake Forest,
Yes.
where he's now the athletic director, and he after like 11 months, right? You called me, and so since then, you were working for Mitch at Tennessee. Mitch becomes the athletic director at Oregon State. And I'm 26 years old, and literally the night before, I'm up in Corvallis, and I'm leaving Oregon to go to Oregon State. I couldn't stand Oregon State. I wanted to lose at everything. And I was 26 years old, and they had 26 straight years of losing football, right? Because I was a Duck. And so Mitch offers me this job, associate AD, 26 years old, Pac-10 school. I'm like, yeah, I had to do it, and I did it. And in Oregon, that was kind of a big deal because of my dad's time at Oregon. And we loved our time at Oregon State. They're wonderful people. Well, the night before I take that job, you called me the next day and said, hey, John Curry's going to Wake. The job is yours. And you're going to be assistant AD at Tennessee. And he said, and I said, Mike, I can't go to Tennessee. I'm not going to go to Tennessee. I'm going to Oregon State with Mitch. And he said, well, you got any good ideas out there? And I said, well, there's this guy who just got out of basketball coaching at Arizona State, and I'm really impressed by him. He's a friend of mine. We used to play softball together. His name's Jim Phillips.
Yes.
And I never say I never like that when somebody says, oh, I got on this job. All I did was introduce you to Jim. And Jim was so talented. Now he's the commissioner of the ACC.
Yeah.
And you hired Jim, and then Kevin White hired him at Notre Dame.
That's right.
And obviously now there's a great rivalry between Alabama and Tennessee, and I'm really glad I never worked at Tennessee. So you actually did me a huge favor, because I'm, as you know, with that rivalry, it's a really good thing that I never worked at Tennessee.
Right.
So there's never been any orange in my blood.
Yeah, so see, you ratted me out about Jim Phillips here on air because I always thought about how I hired Jim Phillips. And now everybody knows I really got it on the recommendation from Greg Byrne.
Have you ever hired somebody without some type of recommendation?
That's exactly right.
You had the wisdom to hire Jim.
That's right.
Yeah. So
That's
no,
right. He's done quite well.
All I was a conduit.
He's done quite well.
You made the good decision.
Yeah. So all right. So you and Mitch were at Oregon State for a while, and then Mitch eventually comes back east to Kentucky, and you make the decision to come back with him, and you guys are rocking and rolling. And by the way, you look back at that cast of characters you guys had at Kentucky. I mean, Rob Mullen, Scott Strickland, Greg Byrne, Dwayne Peavy, Kevin
Mark
Saul,
Coyle.
Mark Coyle. I mean, unbelievable, right? Just an
Good
all-star
group.
staff.
Mitch, as you know, Mitch is. There's nobody more passionate about the experience of the student athlete than Mitch Barnhart.
Yes.
I think you and I are both good at it and genuinely deeply care about it. Mitch is at a whole nother level that I don't know if anybody else is. And we all learned so much working for Mitch, working with Mitch. He identified young people. You and I were both examples of that at a young age, and gave us opportunities more than we really deserved. And it allowed us to have opportunities. And that's what we all have a responsibility for, is the young people in our world, and sometimes more experienced people too, but you see maybe have a skill set that you could utilize more so than what they have. Give them those opportunities.
Yeah.
Put faith in them and show that you believe in what they're doing, and give them a chance to prosper and develop. And you and I were both great beneficiaries of that, as are so many other young people.
Well, Mitch gave me the opportunity to be assistant AD at Tennessee at age 28, which eventually led to me becoming the athletic director there at age 39. I mean, without him seeing something, that said, all right, you can do this job, I'm forever grateful to him for that, obviously.
Me too.
So you worked in Kentucky for a while, and then we alluded to it just a minute ago. You took a pivot
Yep.
I think it was with an actual donor, right?
As one of the top donors of Kentucky. He was. I met him because he bought some courtside seats at Rupp, and we hit it off. Good guy, and and I'm sure the same thing happened to you and plenty of the listeners and viewers. When you're in development, you get to be around successful business people, right? And they see a young gun that is a go-getter, and will call people back and write notes and follow up and ask people for money and not be ashamed to do so. And you have business opportunities. And Roe had started a startup company, and Roe Frazier's his name. He gave me an opportunity, and I was 31 years old. I was a finalist for the AD job at Utah State. I didn't get it, and they hired Randy Spetman, who I just spent some time with last night. And Randy's such a good guy and did a good job at Utah State, and I was impatient. I was ready to conquer the world. And Roe offered me this opportunity. Worked for a company, good people. But it was one of the best things I ever did because I was miserable.
Yeah.
I had no passion for it, and it was a good company. And I probably would have done pretty well financially if I would have stuck with it. So I'm talking to John Curry, and it was interesting. And I learned a lot who my friends were when I got out of athletics. This guy was my friend. Yeah. Okay, I didn't care that I wasn't the head of fundraising at Kentucky anymore. And John Curry was too, and Mitch, and and a few others, but others I never would hear from. I mean, Scott Strickland I heard from all the time, which is why we're still close, very close today. And so John and I were talking, and he said, "Hey," and I told him after about 9 months, I was like, "I want to get back in if there's an opportunity." And he said, "Hey, do you know Jimmy Bass had left Mississippi State?" And Jimmy's who's just announced his retirement, a wonderful guy, and Jimmy. Had been there for a little while at Mississippi State, and so I was going to be in Birmingham the next week. I drove over, saw Larry Templeton in Starkville, and he hired me almost on the spot. And I owe Larry a big, he gave me the chance to get back in because a lot of people get out and never get back in. And then about 9 months later, Larry announced his retirement, and so I was in such a hurry for so long. And once I got out and got back in, my patience level just escalated greatly, and so there's the president was Doc Fogelsong, a retired 4-star general from the Air Force, and he took a risk on a 36-year-old kid and hired me to be the AD at Mississippi State. I think the pool was probably more robust than the local sporting good owner like my dad had, but Starkville wasn't one that a lot of people have on their destination map. And Regina and I ended up loving it there, and our kids did a lot of their growing up in Starkville, and the Mississippi State people are wonderful people, and quite frankly, I wouldn't be at Alabama today if it wasn't for Mississippi State. I truly believe that. Gave
the experience in the league, met some of the players in the league, that kind of thing. So you went from Starkville to Arizona, and then obviously you eventually came back to Alabama where you are now, and doing a great job.
Well, Ced Dempsey, who had been the athletic director at Arizona, then became president of the NCAA back when athletic directors still became president of the NCAA. He recruited me for Dr. Shelton to come to Arizona, and we were there 7 years. And Tucson's a great town, and it's a wonderful university. And I used to say this, maybe trying to encourage a little bit. I may have exaggerated just a hair, but I would always say the two closest fan bases in the Pac-10 and now Pac-12 are Arizona and Oregon, where they're the only games in town. There's a bit of a population base around it, a lot of media attention for those programs. But as you know, I mean, the SEC is the SEC. And so when we were there 7 years and we had a lot of positives happen, but when Alabama called, it was one of the, you take that phone call. Yeah.
I want to go back to you leaving Kentucky for just a second, and then I want to come back to Alabama, because I think you hit on something that I think it's important to call out. We're busy in this business. There's a lot going on. But I just want to encourage, I talked to an athletic director yesterday who had, not long ago lost their job, and they're trying to decide, literally what's next. Mm-hmm. And fearful about what may or may not be next. And at the same time, we're trying to talk about being patient enough to wait for the right thing, because their experience level is significant, and those opportunities will come. But more so, what I want to hit on is we are busy, but I just want to say that this is a relationship orient. This is really a small universe when it's all said and done.
Yeah.
And I would say that when you see one of your colleagues, whether it's in your league or otherwise, you've interfaced with it at NAT or NACTA or NACMA, wherever through the years, just be mindful that it's a big change when all of a sudden you're not in college athletics.
Yeah.
And don't ever, it's kind of like people when, this is a terrible analogy, but a lot of folks are, sometimes they get weird about going to a funeral or not, right? And when you're on the other side of that, just your voice of saying, hey, are you okay, is meaningful. Now, I'm not trying to parallel those two at all, but when somebody leaves and you see that they leave and you've had a relationship with them, just a phone call is meaningful, right? Hey, can you come to a game, or how are you doing, or whatever. And I experienced that, right? When I left Tennessee in 2011, and at the time, there was a time where I thought, well, maybe I'll do this again, or maybe I won't. But there are folks that you become kind of shocked a little bit that you don't hear from them. And I gave grace because I know how busy the job is. But it's amazing how just the short reach out means. And you alluded to it.
Yeah, it's true. It is a relationship business, and it is all consuming, right? However, we all want to have genuine friendships. Mike's my genuine friend. We've been friends for a long time. And when I was out, you still had time for me. And you were AD at Tennessee, right? And Scott Strickland still had time for me, and John Curry still had time for me, and Mitch Barnhart still had time for me. And that made me feel good in a lot of ways. And I try to keep that in mind when I see people who have retired. And I watch my dad. My dad retired from it when he retired and was done at A&M. It was interesting watching that evolution, where the people he'd hear from and the people he wouldn't. But I'll tell you, Mike, even here, it's been 3 years since we've been here. I walked through the hallways, and when I was 30 years old, I knew everybody. Yeah. I don't know that many people. Now, I have a lot of people come up and talk to me, and I want you to know, it's amazing how many people take the time to go up to somebody and introduce that you look up to. And most people look up to me just because I'm so tall, right? Not because I have any special circumstances beyond that. But, just from the last place I was at to here, I probably had 6 people come up and say hello. And obviously I was actually running a little behind, so I said, can you walk with me? So I didn't just blow them off. But learn how to do that. Learn how to have the courage to go up and say to somebody that you look at and say, man, I like to learn from that person. They may say something in a 5-second conversation with you that will be impactful. I mean, I don't know if you were in with Robert Gates yesterday, Dr. Gates. Right. That man, he hired my dad at A&M, and I think the world of him, and wish he would have ran for president of the United States. And he didn't want to, which you can't really blame him. But the words of wisdom that you get from being around somebody like Robert Gates, Secretary Gates, there's not a price you can put on that. And certainly, usually I have to pay people to hang out with me, but in reality, hopefully you can have some type of positive impact that will make a lasting impression.
All right, let's talk about Nick Saban.
I've heard of him.
Yeah, I bet you have, yeah. So earlier today I did a session with Dan Guerrero, and we talked a lot about John Wooden. Mm-hmm. I'm going to have a session coming up where Joan Cronin and I are going to talk about Pat Summitt. There are iconic names in sport, and different sports have different iconic names. Certainly when you look at the history of college football, it's unbelievable to think about Bear Bryant's name at Alabama, mm-hmm. and then all that Coach Saban has accomplished, right? You're working with one of the iconic figures in the history of college football.
Right, history of sport.
History of sport.
Yeah.
Yes. So I'm not going to come at you from the perspective of what are you going to do if he ever retires. I'm going to come.
we're going to hopefully that's 100 years from now.
Yeah, that's right. I'm going to come at you from the perspective of obviously someone who has that level of sustained success for so long. Generally speaking, there's something that you begin to see that drives that success. Mm-hmm. What have you seen?
He deserves so much credit, but also his wife Terry, Miss Terry, deserves a ton of credit too. They are a terrific team, but he lives right around the corner from me, or I live around the corner from him, and he is the most structured and disciplined person I've ever been around. He eats the same thing for breakfast every day. He eats the same thing for lunch every day. He, during the course of the week, during the season, every minute of every day is scripted out, and it's consistent. Not to say it doesn't ever change some, because sometimes it will, because one of the things I've admired about him greatly, one of the many things, but is his ability to evolve.
Yeah.
And right now, at the time we're in our industry, with the transfer portal, name, image, and likeness, all the challenges that we have to deal with, and some of it's good. When I say, but it's still a challenge to adapt and evolve with. He is, at 7 years old, has continued to evolve and adapt there. He's a very good listener. He is really smart. When I tell people this, he has a tremendous heart. He and Miss Terry both do. You know, we had the huge tornado that went through and just demolished a good chunk of Tuscaloosa, and he and Miss Terry, through their Nick's Kids Foundation and working with Habitat for Humanity, has now built a house for every national championship we've ever had in Alabama football. It's 18 of them. They have benefited so many families in our community. They just did a park that I drive by, depending on which way I go home, for special needs children, and it's an adaptive park, and every time I drive by it, if it's not pouring down rain, it is packed with kids, and so they deserve so much credit. But his ability to focus and stay on task and wanting to accomplish great things on a daily basis, and allow that, you hear about the process, to allow you to trust the process to that it will work. That doesn't mean you're going to win every time, but that you're going to be as prepared as you can be to maximize the success of your abilities. And it's really been, I sit there and think, yeah, man, what am I doing sitting here? And he's very respectful of the job that I have to do as the athletic director, and it's been a great honor to work with him, and I hope I get to work with him for a lot longer. Yeah.
Look, I could go a long time on this because it's really interesting to me. One of the things I find interesting is that the number of coaches, guys who have come through his staff, and there's been turnover, and they've gone on to other things, successful things, but yet he just keeps reloading.
He does.
And so obviously he's got great contacts in the field. Obviously other coaches see that there's some merit in working with Coach Saban, but that's not an easy thing, by the way, to continue to replace at a high level. How does he have somebody riding sidecar with him on that, or is that solely Coach Saban?
No, he's got a few people that he bounces ideas off. He'll use the contacts that he have, or maybe somebody I know that can help in the process, and he'll reach out and say, hey, I got this person I'm thinking about, see what you can find out. So he's really good about using the resources that he has, and from being around this as long as he has, both in the NFL and college, he is able to cast a very wide net. And quite frankly, Mike, people want to work for him.
Right.
I mean, it's when I came to Alabama, part of what drew me there was a chance to work with one of the greatest coaches of all time, and what a unique experience that would be. And other people obviously want to do the same thing. And the other thing is, even though he has turnover on his staff, the loyalty that his former coaches have shown towards him over the years has been very significant. And obviously we played Georgia this past year, played them in the SEC championship game and beat them, and then they turned around and beat us for the national championship. And and I know Kirby a little bit, and I know the respect that Kirby has for Coach Saban. And just like, it's a little bit of apples and oranges, but there are some similarities, just like the respect I have for Mitch.
Yeah.
And the admiration and realization that I wouldn't be where I am without the belief he showed in a 26-year-old kid.
So, changing gears again for a second, we're headed down the home stretch. Coleman Coliseum, one of the great buildings in SEC history, but you made the evaluation that now it's time for a change. So you're getting ready to build a new building. Talk a little bit about that decision process and what's next.
Yeah, so we put together a 10-year plan called the Crimson Standard. Now that was before NIL had come in like it had, and so we put out multiple phases, 3 phases that we were going to do as our priorities, so we could have goals and objectives internally, externally, and we could show the vision to our student athletes, our coaches, our staff, and our fan base of where we were going to try to go over the next 10 years. Coleman's over 50 years old, and it's an old building, and just like anything else, things need to be either significantly updated or replaced, and we felt after a lot of study that replacing Coleman was the right thing to do, and we've been having a lot of fundraising conversations, and so we have that. Now we have inflation at a 40-year high, so we're trying to go through what is the actual cost going to be. One of my favorite sayings is people are always really good at spending other people's money. I'm glad that our fan base and our basketball coaches and our gymnastics coach all want to have a new arena, and we need to do it. So it's a priority. I want to make that very clear. We also have to make sure we can do it within a fiscal model that works for us long term. And so with the inflation and everything going on right now, we've had to take some extra steps that we weren't probably anticipating completely, but that doesn't mean that it's still not a priority. It is. And what we want to do, I mean, actually going back to Oregon with my dad, some of my great memories growing up, they had this old arena called Mack Court. It was built, I believe, in the early 1920s. It was 4 balconies, and we would sit in the 3rd balcony to watch the basketball games, and you literally would sit and watch the game like this. I mean, looking right over the top, and it was loud. I remember Adam Key from Stanford refused to shoot free throws until the students would stop making the basket shake. Well, that made him jump up and down more, and the basket moved even more. And, I mean, there were just some great games in there. Reggie Miller couldn't miss when he was playing for UCLA, and I love that steep environment. And so I challenged the architects that we've been working with to create an environment where we can have the students on the floor, have that type of special environment, and then have the non-students or other fans close and intimate with the action. Yeah. And I think the design we put out there is really cool, and something we need to figure out a way to make happen. We also have to make sure we're balancing that with name, image, and likeness and everything else we got going on right now. But it's exciting about what's ahead for it.
Yeah. All right, so final question. Greg, you've been around college athletics for a long time, and I think you're a measured person. I don't think you're, out operating out of emotion. You're very thoughtful in how you view your job. And you and I have had enough relationship that I know that I know what you value about college athletics and the things that are meaningful to you about college athletics. And also, we've shared some of the things that you have concerns about with college athletics. This particular podcast is listened to, several hundred people a week, 500 to 800 people a week, largely industry professionals. Mm-hmm. You're looked to as a leader. Tell me what you see that's still good about college athletics, and there's some things that are on the horizon that you're concerned about that you think that we really need to be mindful. Look, some of it's obvious, right? Right. But I'm just interested in your perspective.
Well, I mentioned a little bit of it earlier, but college athletics is one of the few things left in our country that brings everybody together. When you're at Bryant-Denny Stadium on a Saturday evening, or you're inside the walls of our athletic department as a student athlete, coach, employee, whatever it may be, when you're at Coleman Coliseum, when you're at Rhodes Stadium or a softball team plays, whatever it is, you have young, you have old, okay? You have African American, you have white, you have Asian descent, you have Hispanic, Mexican background, you have Protestant, Catholic, Jewish, non-believers, Muslims, you have just everybody comes together.
Yeah.
And one of the things, even though, like, I grew up in Eugene, Oregon, and there wasn't a ton of diversity within, like, my schools and such, but because of what my dad did, I had the opportunity to be around a lot of different people, and so I've always been very comfortable in diverse backgrounds. In my very biased opinion, but I think as a rational thought, we need more things like college sports. And so as we are wrestling with these new realities, and we have been extremely slow to adapt and to change, and we are dealing with the consequences of that right now. I believe in broad-based programming. I believe in having 20 to 25 sports or 30 sports or whatever the number is. I talked to Tom Theodorakis today, who's now at Harvard, and they've got, I think he told me, 44 sports. Like, oh my God, that's incredible. But it is so special to have those programs and to have all these young people have opportunities. And I'm very concerned about what the model's going to look like, because I think it is going to change. The question is, how dramatically will it change?
Right.
You know, the transformation committee, they've got a tough job to do. They're with Julie and Greg Sankey leading the charge. I think that's a really good leadership, and I have great admiration for the people who are trying to navigate this ship. But one of the worst things we can do right now is, as this changes, that everybody just basically puts their flag down and says, you know, I'm all for us, you know, transforming and evolving, just as long as I don't have to.
Right.
We are all going to have to. We are going through that right now, and we all have to be open-minded about it. And I say that as the AD at Alabama, that I'm very genuinely concerned about that if we don't take some very significant constructive steps. I mean, the enterprise is in crisis.
Yeah.
And so we need to react to the crisis in a very thoughtful way that will benefit student athletes, that will benefit our universities and our campuses, our universities, our communities, our states, to have young people see opportunities to go to college in a lot of different sports, but besides just football or men's and women's basketball, that they can go participate in track, tennis, golf, you know, you name it. I mean, one of my coolest experiences I've had as an AD is when I came to Alabama, and we hired a new rowing coach, a guy named Glenn Poutre, and rowing is a large roster sport, and we have a lot of young women who come out for it as walk-ons and who weren't planning on being athletes in college and have a great opportunity and take advantage of it. And I got to go down on the water with them one time and be in the boat, the boat next to their boats, the motorized boat.
Yes.
And dang, it was cool.
Yeah.
And you know, when you know, one of my greatest memories at Arizona was, you know, we hadn't been to Omaha in 30 years. We hadn't hosted a regional in 30 years. We had never hosted a super regional, and we moved our baseball team off campus to High Corbett, and we had a lot of pushback on it. We had a lot of people saying that was the wrong decision to do, and we thought it was the right decision for a lot of reasons. I won't bore everybody with the details. Well, we had a good team that next year. We hosted our first regional in 30 years, hosted our first ever super regional and won that. Go to Omaha, and we won the dang national championship.
Yeah.
And it was just the 10-year anniversary of it last week. And it was such a highlight for the young men, for the coaches, for our university, for our fans. And those type of moments they can't be replicated with anything else. And the value of what college sports is so great. And there are imperfections in our industry. There's no doubt. But there's so much good too. And I just hope that the model we can come out of it will still allow these type of opportunities, because I think there's extreme value, and that there's often the thought process, oh, it's just all money driven. No, it's not. We have 21 sports. 19 of our sports lose their shorts.
Yeah.
Okay. If you were starting a business, you wouldn't start college sports.
Yeah.
You know, but there is so much good, and we got to make sure we don't lose focus on that.
It's a great conversation, man. I'm glad you're one of the leaders in this conversation, and appreciate you spending some time with me too. It's been really insightful.
Well, I appreciate it, Mike. It's, you know, you're my pal, you're my dear friend, and it means a lot that you'd have me, you know, have the opportunity to sit down with you.
Same. All right, folks, you've been listening to Greg Byrne, the Director of Athletics at the University of Alabama. What a great conversation, really great conversation. I'm Mike Hamilton. We'll see you next time.